Hey everyone, I hope you're doing good. Today, I wanted to talk about little known ways to increase student motivation in the secondary classroom. I think that for many of these points, for the veteran teachers, you may already be aware of some of these. For new teachers, it may be little known ways. And for all teachers, it may just be some things that we haven't thought about before, or that especially teachers that teach longer, we just forget about it. We don't think of it in the hustle and bustle of things. So, one thing that I really realized is that I know that a lot of people blame COVID sometimes a little bit too heavily for the things that we're dealing with in education. But one thing I think that COVID did do is it made us realize how much of a loss of learning that students had during the pandemic. And I think that that's one of the reasons that if you do have students that aren't working, they just seem to be very anti work. You really at first want to look at what their motivation might be, or their lack of motivation. And I always say the first thing that you want to do, especially after COVID has happened, is look at your data. See if you can get a copy of their MAP scores, or sometimes too, a lot of teachers will just make their own pretests if they don't feel like waiting for the school to do their test, which can take forever to do, and getting the scores can take forever as well. So sometimes looking at a pretest or looking at some work that they've turned in can give you an idea of if there is possibly a learning loss that happened during COVID. Because there were so many students that just either did not do any work or online working didn't work for them and they shut down, and they essentially had 2 years of not doing and being on their cell phones. So the one thing that I do think you should do first is look at that data, see what the root cause is. Is it because they're actually gifted and the work is too low for their level, or is it because they've had a lot of learning loss, and maybe they're really behind and what you're giving them may not be achievable at that time for them, so they're kind of just shutting down. Um, Another thing that I've seen before too, especially at the secondary level, because I teach high school, a lot of teachers don't break down really big projects into something that's feasible for students. So if they make the mistake of messing around for a few classes and they get too far behind, they will give up because they know that they have so much to keep up with at that point. It doesn't feel doable to them. So I think a good idea is to break it down, take that big project and maybe break that down into three grades, grades that could even increase gradually. One could be a smaller grade of like a rough draft, one could be a midpoint check in, and then one could be worth a lot of points for the final draft. That way, you give them the chance to jump back in when they realize that maybe they got behind on their work. But for some students, just that really huge assignment can be daunting enough to make them not do it if the task is too big and it's not broken down enough for them to be able to um, kind of space it out. Um, Another thing that I like to do is Kahoots and GimKits. If anyone's ever heard of GimKit, I'll put the link at the bottom after this. It's a really fun like money type of game, but it's the same concept of the vocabulary drilling. Um, I think that no matter what class you teach, you always have academic vocabulary for it, and try every once in a while to get that vocabulary and give the students that opportunity to play a game and have fun. I've even done Kahoots on literally the guidelines of essays and basic things. I remember when I was teaching ninth grade, I used to do Kahoots on like certain parts of the building, certain school policies, just to see that they were paying attention and that they knew what was going on. So I think that we forget that even for the big kids, they do like games, they like fun, and try to see what you can do to still make it engaging for them. Another thing too is making sure that we're giving them positive feedback for their accomplishments. I think that's something else that is very easy to forget to do, especially if you have large classes, you teach public school, there's a lot going on. You're just trying to make it through the day sometimes. But sometimes it could just be as simple as stopping and telling students, like, I'm super proud of you. You had a really good day today. Things were a little rough yesterday, but today was really good. I'm proud of you. And I think that they do like to hear that. Um, but it could also be something actually like related to their work, something really minute. I like how you did that topic sentence, exactly like I showed you how. And your topic sentences were strong. And I really like the way that your writing is growing. But giving them these little small compliments is a good motivator for students. And they also know when you do that too, that you're looking at their work, and they need to know that. Um, Another thing too is I think all teachers, we should be trying to encourage them to take ownership of their learning. And a lot of that too can be done through reflection activities, asking them, what helped them learn best, what activity you did that maybe they felt like they didn't get a lot out of, and why. Um, Goal setting for academics can also really help them take ownership of their learning, and going back to that, giving them goals that they set, and don't forget that, like print it out or keep that paper and give it back to them, and force them to say, okay, well, this is what you told me you wanted to work on. Have you been doing that the past few months? And there's an accountability factor to it that will make them start to feel like, okay, I did say that I was going to try to work on this. Um, and I think that a lot of teachers too, I think especially older teachers, are not as maybe familiar with student centered teaching. But I think that for a lot of our students today, I think they learn better. And student centered teaching is where we back off of the lecture, so much of the lecture, and we are kind of making them research things and answer stuff. And we're there to facilitate, and we will help them in some ways, but we're not just telling them everything, talking a hole in their head, and then, making them memorize everything and do the work. So one good thing with student centered teaching is like those reflections I told you about. That's student centered teaching. Doing a research project and making them start researching things up front before you give it all to them is student centered teaching. Um, but there's an accountability factor that I think helps a lot with students. Um, Also, peer mentoring and tutoring can be so helpful because students are still very competitive. And when they see their friends doing well, and trying to talk sense out of them, sometimes the honest truth is they listen more to them than they will to us. And I think that is something to keep in consideration. If you have students that are really going through a rough time and you have another student that you might be able to get to talk to them, or even just academic, they're struggling, but another student that they get along with that has a good hold on it, and help, and encouraging that you can still talk to your peers. They can help you, not just me. Um, Helps a lot, and I think their guard gets let down a lot. Um, and feedback, like as far as the actual work, give relevant feedback. Especially again at the high school level. I know it's different at elementary, but high school where they're like big classes, which I have been teaching lately, it is really easy to get behind on giving feedback or helping them. But what ends up happening is if you're a hard grader or you're not giving them the grade they probably want, if you don't tell them what it is that they've done to make that mistake, they're going to keep making it. And the more that they keep making it and not getting the grade that they want, and they're not getting feedback from you, the more that they're going to go into that shutdown mode. And they're going to lose motivation. So if you give them feedback, make sure it's not just, you did well or you struggled, but actually telling them, I need you to structure this the way I talked to you about. The organization we discussed, why aren't you following that? Why aren't you elaborating? Where's your text evidence? But, make it specific and relevant to what they're working on. Um, and really, the focusing on a growth mentality links back to the student centered teaching and things, but trying to foster just a love of learning and not being so heavy on those grades, because especially at the high school level, that's what students default to. Everything is this a grade? Is this a grade? What grade can I get? What can this bring me down to? What can this lift me up to? And just kind of getting to that place where I have even been evasive with students before, and they're like, "Is this a grade? I don't know. We'll see." And sometimes just having that idea of, I want to make sure you learn from this. Don't ask me about grades right now, and build you know, that focus on learning. And then finally, I know this one seems so obvious when we say get to know your students, but to be specific, I mean, not just getting to know their name and speaking to them, but when you get that chance, sometimes getting the idea of if they're taking extracurricular activities, um, what they might be going through personally at home, because then that sometimes gives you a head up of when they don't seem to have the best attitude, or they're doing something that doesn't seem like them. It's nice to know, just as a teacher, because we are still mandated reporters, to know what's going on if we can know, but then to also not kind of lash out at them and be rude to them because they're not doing what we want them to do. Um, when it might be something going on that if you just had that conversation with them or maybe the parents, you might have a little bit more clarity on that motivation. So, this is the blog post I did today on ways to motivate our students. And I wanted to make sure I'm keeping these videos no more than 10 minutes. So I'm a few seconds over, but I'm going to put the link to the bottom. And you teachers out there, please let me know if you have any questions or any suggestions about what we talked about. Bye.